Dunedin is one of New Zealand's most beautiful cities. The Pacific Ocean is one boundary and the Otago province the other. The 32-kilometre protecting arm of the beautiful Otago Peninsula is home to an abundance of wildlife. And at Tairoa Head, the royal albatross come to breed in a unique colony that is only an hour's drive from the city centre. The long natural harbour formed by the peninsula provides a recreational playground for salmon fishing, sailing, windsurfing, rowing and of course swimming. It was the Scots who founded the city in 1848 and they were quick to identify the area as a bonny place to build a city. In 1869 they established New Zealand's first university, the University of Otago. The discovery of gold in central Otago in 1861 paved the way for Dunedin to prosper. The locals quickly learned that the real wealth lay in servicing the prospectors and miners and the primary producers. By the end of the 19th century, Dunedin was thriving. It was the financial capital of New Zealand and with its wealth began building impressive commercial and domestic buildings. The city has some outstanding architecture, including museums, churches, galleries, and the university. And while its people enjoy the best in libraries, theatre, art, culture, sports, and music. Outstanding in this mix from the prosperous early 20th century is Olveston, the home of David Edward Thierman. David Thierman was born in Bristol, England in 1852. He was the son of a Jewish minister who had 4 other children and very little money with which to raise them. Nevertheless, David went to the Bristol Grammar School for 3 years and held dear some memories of childhood holiday visits to a village called Olveston on the outskirts of Bristol. His working life began in 1865 as an apprentice to a merchant trading out of Bristol. David continued to work in the mercantile world in Bristol until 1874. It was then he set out for Melbourne, Australia. His half-brother Abraham had already established a business there, and David soon perfected his business skills in the fledgling capital of Victoria. It was in Melbourne he married Marie, daughter of Maritz Michaelis, and at the end of 1879 the newlyweds had moved to New Zealand to establish a home in Dunedin. During the 1880s, David Thierman established himself as a very successful businessman, developing the mercantile firm of Benjamin and Company, and opening branches of his Dresden piano company throughout New Zealand. His newfound success was shared with the community, particularly the Dunedin Public Art Gallery. This support complemented his own passion for art. By 1900, his distinctive enthusiastic style for collecting art was at its height. It was about this time that David began planning a home to house his impressive collection of art and artefacts. Sir Ernest George, one of London's most fashionable architects, was commissioned to design what was to become Olveston. From 1904, a magnificent 35-roomed mansion in a Jacobean style began to grow on its site in Royal Terrace. At the start of 1907, Olveston, named after the village near Bristol, was finished. Olveston is an excellent example of modern Edwardian comfort and convenience. An opulent expression of the romantic Victorian era and domestic grandeur. It possessed a service lift linking all 4 stories. The house was centrally heated. It had an internal telephone communication system, and even the bathrooms were way ahead of their times. The lifestyle enjoyed by the Thiermans at Olveston from 1907 to 1914 was very special, and one enjoyed by just a few. While the lifestyle may have quickly passed, the house allows a glimpse at a day in the life of the Thiermans at the turn of the 20th century. That it is captured so completely at Olveston is nothing short of a miracle. The golden years for Olveston should have lasted for decades, but for World War I. In 1922, Mr. Thierman took delivery of a brand new Fiat Tourer. This limousine was a classic example of elegant European motoring. 3.4 litres of driving pleasure. The car was used by the Thiermans for many journeys into central Otago and up the east coast of the South Island. In 1994, 72 years after it was purchased, the original Fiat was located and fully restored. It now has pride of place in the garage that was built in 1914. The garage incorporated a heating system, a pit for servicing, and a carport at the rear for the chauffeur to clean and load the car for any long journeys. What makes Olveston special is that the architect, Sir Ernest George, combined a rich tradition of English Tudor and Jacobean domestic architecture to create a perfect home for his client. And it is thought to be his only design in the Southern Hemisphere. It demonstrates a well-balanced coherence of external and internal design. Set on a gently sloping acre, the boldly asymmetric south front is an impressive welcome to visitors. The soft brown tones coming from the local Moraki pebbles used to cover double brick walls. Contrasting cream North Otago limestone was used for the cornerstones, and the fine leaded mullion windows, many of which incorporate stained glass. An exuberant oriel window placed high within a Dutch gable. And a tower block, complete with a flagpole and weather vane above the canopied entrance, add a distinctive touch of elegance. On the east side of the house, protecting bay windows suggest permanence, comfort and spaciousness without undue display. Well-integrated downpipes with a repeated decorative feature enhance the walls. The steep pitched tiled roof and chimneys are best seen from the north above simple gables. Olveston provided the Thiemans with a perfect setting to entertain both professional and personal friends. 7 servants were employed to service the 35 rooms and to manicure an acre of beautiful garden. Whether the gathering was large or small, taking tea at Olveston was something of an occasion. Mr. and Mrs. Thiemann were gracious hosts. Guests would be quickly put at ease. There were many indications that Mr. Thiemann wanted his guests to appreciate Olveston not as a grand house, but as a welcoming family home.
Good afternoon, come in. The cloakroom, madam, please. Your hat and gloves, sir. Thank you. And when you're ready, sir, the bell. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
The well-appointed cloakroom was the visitor's introduction to the grand house. Of course, it was imperative to look one's best when visiting Olveston. The vestibule, or entrance hall, is spacious, designed and furnished to create a relaxed atmosphere for the guests. Even the impressive collection of arms, mainly from Japan, were non-threatening. After the butler had greeted the guests, they were ushered into the drawing room to be received by the Thiemans. The drawing room was popular for entertaining. It was used for both formal and informal occasions, from serious music recitals to the more relaxed family gathering. It is the only room to have a decorative ceiling and houses Olveston's largest collection of watercolours. The drawing room was a social leisure room. Marie Michaelis was 24 when she married David Thiemann. She ran her household with efficiency and was known as a firm but kindly lady. She was very active in the newly formed Plunket Society, originated for the care of mothers and their babies. This interest was also shared by her husband. Her involvement continued until her death in 1926. The Theamans were very community-driven, and during the First World War, Mr. and Mrs. Theaman both served on the Otago Patriotic Council. The Theamans' only son, Edward, was born in 1885. Edward was destined to follow in his father's footsteps, but the Great War intervened and Edward was soon fighting for his country in France. After the war, he married Ethel Macotta in London before returning to Dunedin. But the war had taken its toll, and by 1924 his health began to decline. He survived his mother by only 2 years, dying in 1928, leaving no heirs. David Theaman, husband and father, continued an active life until 1933. A self-made man, he worked tirelessly to produce the financial resources required to build and run Olveston. His wide interests in the arts also included a passion for music. He was a member of the Royal Dunedin Male Choir. He was also involved in the affairs of the Dunedin Synagogue and worked hard in the interests of the Dunedin Chamber of Commerce, the Shipwreck Relief Society and the Patients and Prisoners Aid Society. When David died at the age of 81, the Theaman's only daughter Dorothy was the only member of the immediate family still living. Dorothy was born in 1889 and began her education in Dunedin. This was completed at Roedean in England. She survived her father by 33 years and died at the age of 77. Her main interests were divided equally between indoor and outdoor pursuits. She loved the outdoor life. She was noted for her abilities as a horsewoman, but her chief passion were the mountains of the Southern Alps, and for many years she was a member of the New Zealand Alpine Club. Throughout her life, she continued her parents' interests in the Dunedin Public Art Gallery and the Plunkett Society. Dorothy Michaelis Theaman died on the 11th of October in 1966. It was revealed at the reading of her will that she left Olveston, all its contents, and an annual estate income to the city of Dunedin. It took 12 months of hard work for her many friends to pave the way for Olveston to become the historic family home that visitors can enjoy today.
Right, now we are in the drawing room, the only room in the house with a pattern ceiling. And if you look up that end...
About 50,000 visitors a year from all round the world visit Olveston. Because of the integrity of the gift Dorothy made, Olveston grows more important and precious as a living record from a lifestyle long ago. A time capsule of a family and its home.
Over here we have a Steinway grand piano dated the beginning of the 20th century. Does anyone play the piano? Would someone like to now?
All right,
Would you like to? Right. And remember, this is 1906. There's a warming oven here, a roasting oven for the joints and meat, a baking oven for cakes and bread, and you'll note there is a thermometer here And behind this door, there is a second door, a see-through mica oven door.
Some of the interesting design features included no external door to the scullery. Deliveries including parcels, bread, fish, meat and vegetables were passed through the scullery window. The butler's pantry was his office, and from here the organisation and running of Olveston was done. This 1810 English venison meat platter was used when carving meat at the table. Linen was pressed in this hand-carved native kauri napery press before being laid on the table. Much of the precious china, including the wedgwood, was used on a daily basis by the Thiemans. Nowadays, its purpose is strictly ornamental.
Right, here you see the dining table is set for dinner for 8. The table can actually be extended to seat 20 people around it quite comfortably. The crystal glasses.
Originally, with its own curtains, the linen splashcloth provided valuable protection for the expensive wallpaper. This French lantern clock from the early 18th century is typical of the treasures to be found at Olveston.
And as you can see, there are paintings on every wall. And the family used to entertain in here. And as you can see, it was home to quite a large number of the pieces in the family collection. Would you please follow me up the oak staircase?
This 17th century Spanish or Portuguese papelera was used by officials on their travels to house documents and precious papers. Believe it or not, its main benefit being its relative portability. A dry point etching by Lee Hankey is a spectacular example of the artist's ability to capture emotion through a difficult medium. And from the small Lee Hankey to the largest painting at Olveston, an unknown artist's reproduction of the Vernizet original, on display in the National Gallery, purchased for £250 in 1918. It is an example of the Thiemens' love for beautiful paintings.
Full-size billiard table, slate base. The slate is about 2 inches thick. The table weighs over 2 tons, and of course the floor is reinforced to support the weight of the table. The height of the lights can be adjusted. There's a pulley in beside the chimney there, and you see there is a second pulley that opens the windows up above, so that if the pipe and cigar smoke got too much for them, they would just simply adjust these windows.
Olveston's priceless collection of arts and treasures in this room were collected from around the world. The largest percentage of these came from East Asia and in particular Japan. Miniature ivory carving was a craft that the Japanese perfected. Skilled craftsmen with the most basic tools would spend months producing just one of these amazing miniatures. When acquired by the Thiemens, the use of this material was acceptable. Fondly called the Persian or card room, this was a special place for the family. Somewhere to relax and enjoy a little peace while still having contact with the billiard room and the grand hall. Olveston was a Jewish home, and it is in the Persian room where a Star of David lamp made from grey-toned alloy is proudly displayed. When the Thiemens moved into Olveston in 1907, their daughter Dorothy returned from finishing school in Rodine, England. The effect of her schooling was very apparent in this her sitting room and her adjoining bedroom. As a young lady of 17 and a typical teenager, it wasn't long before she decorated her rooms with the things that she loved, like the trinkets she'd collected, paintings, toys and ornaments. The sitting room is the plainer of the two rooms, but the colour scheme flows harmoniously into the bedroom. The pink ribbon paper border adding an essential touch of femininity to her room. The decorative French design was very popular in the early 1900s. Dorothy's bedroom was restored and reopened to the public in 1995. Edward's room was opened to the public in 1994, 66 years after his death. The decorations were mainly from the Art Nouveau period and were considered very modern for the time. Edward lived at Olveston for only 10 years. In 1914, the Great War saw Edward overseas. He returned a married man and, until his death in 1928, lived just down the road at 8 Royal Terrace. The bathroom, probably more than any other room, is the best example of the modern facilities that Olveston had. Many of the luxuries we now take for granted were, in 1907, way ahead of their time. For example, this heated towel rail. David's dressing room leaves you in no doubt that this is a male's dressing room. The powerful green influence represented by the fireplace and furniture tiles and furniture blend into this durable yet masculine atmosphere. The twin brass beds with the elaborate embroidered bedspreads were typical of the Thiemann's taste for fine furnishings. The master bedroom continues the Sheraton theme. With no built-in furniture, the distinctive wardrobes, dresses and tallboys dominate the room. The Axminster rugs on the floor of the two rooms are a Green and Abbott design from Oxford Street, London. The master bedroom, or the Green Suite, was restored in 1997. The rose frieze promoted the panelling effect of the Green Suite. The original papers were manufactured in Buffalo, New York State, USA, and were selected by the Thiemann's on one of their trips to America. A visit to Olveston would not be complete without a walk in the gardens. The Thiemann's appreciation for beautiful things also extended to the garden. An acre of garden required constant attention and a supply of plants. Many of these were propagated in Olveston's glasshouse. Olveston grows older, both the house and the collection. Their needs are very diverse in restoration and preservation. An enormous financial resource is required to keep Olveston in its present immaculate condition. Olveston is Dunedin heritage at its best and will remain a leading tourist attraction for many years to come. The whole entity that is Olveston must be preserved, a treasure frozen in time. Let's hope for a very long time to come.